Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I also appreciate the Minister for being the first to answer questions here. Mr. Minister, the question was the Cabinet to explain why mothers in public hospitals, then especially Mama Linda, you therefore, okay, Linda Mama, okay, why mothers in public hospitals, especially those
out a personal secret.
Yes. Why those on Linda Mama program are delayed? The implication of the question, Mr. Speaker, is that actually in private hospitals this is not a problem, and those mothers who are also paying directly is not a problem. This is not in line with the minister's answer, which is that there is a shortage of forms at the printing level. If the problem was at printing level, then obviously this should affect all mothers, whether private, whether Linda Mama. So that's what is the issue there. And also, the number of children that are born annually is a factor that is publicly known. It's about between 1.5, around 1.5 million. And the minister is saying he needs information on this number. So if that's not satisfactory, can we have clarification on those 2 points, Mr. Speaker?
Thank you. Dr. Bukose. If you ask just one question at
Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Thank you.
Mary Emase.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for finally noticing us around this corner. Mr. Speaker, I want to emphasize on the issue of decentralizing issuance of birth certificates. Mr. Speaker, it is a very serious issue. My mothers go to another sub-county to look for birth certificates. And sometimes they are told those forms are not there. They have to travel so many kilometers severally. So I just want to emphasize that there is need to have a center in every sub-county. And Mr. Speaker, speaking of security, because I do not have time to ask, I just want to add one. That sometimes we even use our assistant chiefs and chiefs actually to collect those birth certificates, take them to the center. And I want to just request the CS kindly, across the country we have administrative units where the chiefs or assistant chiefs have passed on or have retired. They have not been replaced. A number of administrative units, like even divisions like in Teso South, were created. They have not yet been operationalized. Kindly, can you do something about it? Because they play a critical role in security. They help us with the birth certificates. They help us in even acquiring IDs. If there is no assistant chief or a chief to do the vetting, then our people are not getting these very necessary services on time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity.
Now you have resorted to raising your hands like in a classroom. The member, I can't see that far. The honorable member from, is it Mandera? The one next in front of Emase. Sorry, honorable member, I can't see you clearly because of the lighting. Honorable Sane. 1 minute, Honorable Sane. I couldn't see you clearly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Your hand was up for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can use my colleague's mic. I come from a county which is 56,000, over 56,000 square kilometers. I do appreciate the work of the PS. For the first time since independence, he has posted at least death and birth officers last week. But the rest of the sub-counties do not have officers. Forget about forms. So in as much as I appreciate Honorable Wangari's question, when is the Cabinet Secretary posting all the officers in all the sub-counties of Wajir, which is twice the size of Rwanda as a country? Thank you.
CNN, Guna.
Thank you.
One question.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, some members here are very lucky. I am talking of the new constituencies which were created in 2013. In my constituency, Mwingi West, there is no single registration center on this. What is the ministry doing to ensure that these constituencies, at least members don't have to go to other constituencies to access the same service? Thank you.
Minister, you may answer those. And just before you do that, allow me, in case we have held these students for too long, we acknowledge the presence of students from Manyien Senior School in Kikuyu, Kiambu. They are in the public gallery, and in the speaker's gallery we have St. Albert the Great, Siakago Boys High School, Bere North in Embu. You are welcome to the House of Parliament. Minister Hall, I give a member for Lamu East. And who is out of order, Madam Chelule, to run across the floor with your hand raised.
Asante Bwana Spika kunipatia nafasi. Nami ni muulize waziri ana mipango gani kwa wakazi wanaoishi mbali na ambapo hawana maofisa wala hawana hizo ofisi. Mtu kama wa Kiunga inamgharimu shilingi 1400 kutoka Ishakani mpaka Kiunga shilingi 300. Kiunga Tumkokoni ndio upande boat ni shilingi 700. Boti ya Mirao ukipanda from Mkokoni kufika Mokoe ambao kuna ofisi ni shilingi 3000. Njia moja ni 1400 kurudi 1400, 1800 kwenda kutafuta birth certificate. Sehemu kama hizo una mipango gani ambao hazina hizo ofisi? Paka tuje maeneo bunge mengine ndo tutafute hizo huduma. Asante Bwana Speaker.
Let's have the answers now. Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, one of the priorities for us as a ministry is institutional reforms within the security sector, immigration, citizen services, prisons, correctional services. As I began by saying earlier this afternoon, Honorable Speaker, we admit that the rate at which and the efficiency at which government services are being rendered is not satisfactory, and therefore we have considered that institutional reform, organizational culture change is a priority for all the departments within our ministry. I therefore want to accept the critical sentiments that have been raised about our performance, and we are working very hard to make sure that we do better. And going forward, this administration will be more than happy to report progress made on each and every sector. We have instituted baseline surveys for each and every service that we are offering, so that every 3-6 months we can be able to track progress. Having said so, Honorable Speaker, the Leader of Majority did ask whether we are remaining with the printing of documents or we are going digital. Honorable Speaker, the policy of government is to digitize all the services that it offers. I can report, as we speak, 5,771 services are partially digitized, out of which 3,293 services across government have been digitized end-to-end, and the other 2,498 are not partial, they are not end-to-end. The total is 5,771. 2,498 partially, 3,293 completely. So that is the policy. Digitization, Honorable Speaker, will come with its challenges. but it's a decision this government has taken to proceed that way. However, Honorable Speaker, that does not take the words that I spoke earlier, that still, as we wait towards complete digitization, we must continue producing and giving services, because our mothers are still giving birth as we speak, as we wait for this process to be consummated completely. And therefore, we are intended to make sure we satisfy the demand. I want to assure members will make progress. The Honorable Member for Gilgil asked for timelines. On 27th of March this year, which is 3 weeks ago, we initiated a rapid response initiative at the CRS, and therefore we're expecting 90 days that issue of shortage to be addressed, even as we wait for digitization, as well as the issue of equipment modernization. Honorable Speaker, a question has been raised on remote and far-flung areas. The example given by the member for Lamu East. I'll be visiting Lamu East next week for 2 days, and I think the example the member has given is an urgent priority, and I think we should be able to open a registration center in Kiunga as a matter of priority, because the need as described here is quite unique comparing to other parts of the country. I want to commit to the member and to the House that we're going to open a registration center there. Honorable Speaker, also, even as we continue with the digitization, we will still need registration centers. At the moment, out of the 369 sub-counties, in implementation of the motion passed by this House earlier on, we have civil registration centers in 137 sub-counties, meaning we are less than half. But we are continuing to open new ones on a needs basis. My PS for Citizen Services, I sent him to open one in Kajiado 1 month ago, and I think he is opening another one in Kobo, I think in a month's time. And this will be resolved as we continue to make sure that every sub-county has a civil registry. Honorable Speaker, also, the issue raised by the member from Mwingi West, I think Mwingi West is also an area which requires special measures, and I think we'll put it in our priority. Subject to resources, we will ensure that an area that like Mwingi gets that center also opened. I want to commit to the House that at least the ones that have been identified on the floor of this House by members, in the next 2 months, there will be a civil registration center, including the one raised about Wajir. Honorable Speaker, on this question and earlier on, a question was raised about administrative units. About 80 sub-counties were gazetted just before last election, and they are not operational. We do not have the resources to operationalize all those sub-counties. So what we have decided is to stagger the operationalization of all the gazetted sub-counties in a 3-year period, starting June this year. And the criteria we will use is the nature of hardship and inconveniences to service delivery, as well as regional balance, so that the first criteria of the 20 to 25 sub-counties to be operationalized this financial year starting June will take care of regions, but also hardship, size, population, and all the other factors. We'll come up with a criteria which will be fair and which can be shared to members if they want to know what criteria we will use to identify those that will come first, and then second, and then the third financial year. Honorable Speaker, I can also report to the House that areas where assistant chiefs and chiefs have not been recruited, my PS for internal security has already approved the recruitment process, and therefore we expect all those positions to be filled in the next 90 days across the country. Honorable Speaker, then I think again a question was asked between technology and what we are doing in the old fashion. Going forward, before cabinet is a policy brief, is a cabinet brief which is under consideration on the UPI, the Universal Personal Identifier. And I think in the next 1 or 2 weeks it will be disposed of, so that we migrate, we converge two things. One, that every child in Kenya gets a universal personal identifier at birth, which becomes their number in school, their whatever number they require. And when they are 18, that number is the ID number. Then at the same time and in parallel, another universal personal identifier for adults who are getting IDs. So you have a universal personal identifier at birth, and for the existing, because that one, by the time the first adult will use the UPI, it will be 18 years from when we commence. But in the meantime, we are migrating, we are considering, subject to approval by cabinet, migrating the current ID we have into a fourth generation ID, which is the UPI for adults, which of course will take away the question of Huduma number, which was not solving the kind of problems that we intend to solve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister, about single mothers who cannot produce the fathers of the children's IDs.
Honorable Speaker, it is no longer a requirement of the law for a registration of a child to include both parents. It is not a requirement. It is now possible to register one parent if you are a one-parent child. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Honorable members, will move to question 105 of 2023. Member for Mandera South.
Here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask question 105 of 2023. Could the Cabinet Secretary, 1, state the measures being taken to establish civil registration centers in every sub-county in the country so as to ease access to civil registration services? 2, state the measures the ministry is putting in place to immediately set up a civil registration at Elwak and Kutulo sub-counties in Mandera South to serve the huge population in the region, considering that the closest civil registration center to Mandera South constituency is located nearly 220 kilometers away from Mandera town and also serves Mandera North, Mandera West, Banisa, and Lafe constituencies. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister, this is nearly similar to the question of Mother Wangari, so we shouldn't spend too much time on this. Answer the question, and I'll allow one bite by the member who asked and one more member. Go ahead, Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, just as I have told the House on the issue of operationalization of the administrative units that are gazetted and not operational, we are finalizing a criteria which will help us implement the recommendations of this House in the motion which was cited by the Honorable Member for Gilgil, to make sure that every sub-county has a civil registry. So what we've done is that we have taken the remainder of all, we have taken the list of all the sub-counties that do not have a civil registry, and we want to implement, because there are quite many, unlike the sub-counties, we want to implement that motion in the next 5 years, but based on a criteria. That criteria, just as in the first case with sub-counties, will be as follows. First of all, those that will get centers, because right now, Mr. Speaker, if I can explain this for half a minute, at the moment we are opening these centers on the request of individual members of parliament. Like I cited the Kajiado North, it was a request by the MP. I cited Imenti South. The member for Imenti South, who I can confirm, is the one who wrote and requested for a center. And we felt that perhaps we should have an objective criteria so that, again, we make sure that that implementation of the recommendation of this House is done fairly, equitably, and making sure that every part of the country is covered. So the criteria will involve, first of all, regional diversity, so that we pick in the first year, every region of our country will be represented in those that will be open this year, but also special and unique circumstances like topography, hardship, population, and so forth. Going forward, to avoid, complaints, public complaints, at a future date, now that this tradition of ministers appearing before the House has begun, I'll be more than happy later on, when the opportunity happens, to provide an update to the House where we are, the criteria we are using. By that time we'll have adopted it, and then the rollout, to ensure that no part of the country is favored and no part of the country will be left out. In fact, on the Wajir issue, generally northern Kenya, upper eastern, upper coast, pastoral areas generally, I think special attention will be given to those areas, because I have been there and I know it is quite challenging when one has to travel, as was the case raised by the member for Lamu East. You use 10,000 shillings to go and look for a birth certificate. Another Kenyan is using matatu and paying 50 bob to and fro. But all these factors will be taken into consideration, because we want an equitable country and a country where public policy is informed by objective criteria. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I thank the Minister for the answer. Probably most of the answers that I would have wanted had been preempted in the previous question.
I feel the same.
Ramogi joang mano kanyo en twak madhi mbele od bura malo ka bende en twak mabende oriwo koda ka jatend migao mar weche mag arita mapacho ka Angire Kithure Kindiki oketo ler kendo duoko piny motendore kod arita ahinya te gwenge ma Homaro Kaka moting'o North Rift, Samburu mabenje monj osebedo kadhi mbele kata pone piny owacho osebedo koketo arita kanyo kendo wacho ni tima pedha ne jonjore mosebedo ka kwalo jamni kendo miyo oganda mathoth wito ngimagi. Awi iko twak ma kamano nyakwa mga juang imed winjo kaka twak no dhi mbele e od bura mamalo. Nyinga Lydia Okeo.
As a proof of that registration, and that is why we are asking for physical facility and officers who would be in those centers. To put what I'm particularly in my constituency, when I mentioned Elwak and I mentioned Kutulo, those are two sub-counties in one constituency, vastly, spread apart. Mandera town, where the civil registration center is, the only civil registration center we have in Mandera County, is 220 kilometers from Elwak. And I'm sure the cabinet secretary knows the problems that are there traveling between Elwak and Mandera, especially with the menace from those bad guys from across the border. That road has been a very risky road, especially when you are traveling between Elwak and Mandera, and also between Kutulo and Elwak. So you travel 220 kilometers, and the only bus...
Honorable Member, you are now making a speech.
Okay, the only bus that you use for transport between two is the bus that comes from Nairobi. That's what you wait for, so that you can hike it to Mandera. So my plea to the cabinet secretary is that a sub-county like Elwak and Kutulo, which are some of the oldest in that region, surely require civil registration centers very urgently, because of the importance of those certificates that the Honorable Mother Wangari had mentioned earlier, the NEMIS, if you want to travel with your child from Mandera now, you cannot take that child on the flight if they don't have a birth certificate. And this all is a challenge, and we require those documents in Mandera. I think the answers that have been given, the usual answers that we hear when government gives answers to lack of facilities, lack of officers, lack of funding. These are answers which.
Honorable Harrow, you are debating.
Okay, sir.
I gave you an opportunity to ask a supplementary if you feel your question was not sufficiently answered.
So what the Honorable Cabinet Secretary mentioned that some of the initiatives come from the MPs, and I have the benefit of having a copy of his written answer, and he had mentioned of partnership between the Member of Parliament and the national government offices on the ground. I would want to know what would that partnership look like? How does it manifest itself? Because we would really want to initiate those initiatives and see what that partnership can do to help our people on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Rindi Kiri, one question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the PS for the confidence he has answered our questions, but I have a problem, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the issuance of passports. There are some questions that I think that form need to be reviewed, particularly on the fathers, mothers, and even the children, some of who could be deceased. I don't see the relevance for that. Two, there is so many migrants who have come to this country purporting to be experts in various fields. They have been given permit to work in Kenya. Even some of them have no technical expertise, taking jobs for Kenyans who are even very qualified. What is this that the ministry is doing to ensure that we don't have hawkers coming here purporting to be expert in various fields? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Julius Sunguli, 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to ask the Minister to confirm whether the answer he gave about birth certificates also applies to forms for registration of persons. Because as far as Kilgoris is concerned, there has been no registration, fresh registrations of persons for nearly 6 months now, and the reason being that there are no forms. What is the Minister going to do to ensure that those forms are available? And attached to that, Mr. Speaker, if the Minister could confirm, could